All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and welcome to Web Wednesday, the weekly show where we bring on people that are much smarter than me, which is typically a low bar, to ask them questions about web development. And honestly, the way that I try to find guests and build topics is by going through my list of friends and finding friends that work on things that I don't know really well, but I know that I should. And so that led me to Beth. Beth is actually a friend of mine. She graduated from the Ohio State University, although we although we won't hold that against her. And she actually spent a fair bit of time over at Microsoft Learn, doing some stuff on MVA. May that now rest in peace. And she now works on the Graph Toolkit and works something with identity. I'm honestly not even sure exactly what it is that she does in that space. So I'm super excited to bring her on to chat about that and to chat about Graph Toolkit. So yeah, Beth, thanks for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, it was really hard for me to say the Ohio State University.
I think it's funny that you're like, Beth is actually a friend of mine, but she graduated from Ohio State.
The reason that we're joking about this for anybody who's not U.S. based or not big into college football, probably the biggest rivalry, not that it's been much of a rivalry of late, in college football is Michigan and Ohio State. Beth went to Ohio State, and I've been a lifelong Michigan fan because I just hate pain and disappointment. Is really, I think, what it boils down to. Thank you. Yeah, somebody's already in the chat with a go blue. So there we go. There we go.
That's
so,
okay. I'm not salty about this.
Well, that's all right. You've got the record to lean on here. So
True.
yeah,
When
exactly.
you're the winning team, you can't be too obnoxious about it, right?
No, but that won't stop you, and that's why we love you.
Just not today. Maybe next time.
Maybe next time. Cool. So Beth, I always like to start with this question, which is, how did you become Beth Pan? How did you get to where you are? How did you find your way to Microsoft? How did you find your way into doing like Graph Toolkit? How did you become Beth Pan?
This is going to be taking up all 90 minutes of this session. We'll be talking about no graph or toolkit, just so
Well, we've only got an hour, so that right there will cut you down. So let's go with the Cliff Notes version. Let's go with like the 5-minute version here.
Cool. So I was actually born and raised in China, came to America because I thought I'd, change of pace, do a different kind of educational system might be fun. So that's when I went to the Ohio State University. I actually graduated from business school, went to Fisher Business School. And then, I don't know, somehow I think it was my last internship before graduating with Nationwide Insurance. They kind of offer me a combo type of role that's part software engineer, part doing business related stuff, plannings and that sort of things, because the SharePoint team was very, very young. We were doing startup style works. So then I became a SharePoint developer / administrator. We had our own. I know every time I say that, people's like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you. That's your first job." For those of you who doesn't know, we used to joke that SharePoint is the next COBOL, just because the development process is really difficult. Not because the tool sucks. It's just for developer. The development experience was not the best at the beginning. Later on, I kind of gotten into, I feel like I really like the hybrid of doing development on top of marketing, evangelism, writing docs, building samples. So started looking for opportunities that could help me grow on this particular aspect. And Microsoft happened to used to have a role called, I think, developer advocates, maybe, or a developer evangelist. I think Christopher used to be part of that org as well.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how I joined. I was originally hired to do Microsoft Graph SDKs, so which involves a lot of building the tools and the things that developer likes, and could potentially bring on more third-party developers to build on top of our platform and technology. Fast forward almost 5 years, now it's 4 years. I've gone full circle, had many jobs within Microsoft. Now I'm back to the graph world, working on actually a partner org. We are managing the first party and third party developer ecosystems now, working with the Microsoft ISVs and also open source communities in order to better some of the tool chains and developer toolings that we have. So specifically, I am currently working on the Microsoft Graph Toolkit, which is a component library that helps you super accelerate your development with Microsoft Graph.
That is fantastic. I love all of that. So then let's start with the basic question. What is Microsoft Graph? Let's start there. What is Microsoft Graph?
Every time people ask me what's Microsoft Graph, I always wanted to go to the documentation and read up the first paragraph and see what people say about that. So here is the official version.
The official version.
The official version. And then I'll give you my version. The official version is Microsoft Graph is the gateway to data and intelligence in Microsoft 365. It provides a unified programmability model that you can use to access the tremendous amount of data in Microsoft 365, Windows 10, and enterprise mobility and security. Use the wealth of data in Microsoft Graph to build apps for organizations and consumers that interacts with millions of users. A lot to unpack. So my version...
A little less marketing-ese there, a little less dense.
My version of Microsoft Graph it's an API.
Okay.
And it's the API that rules all the APIs that you used to work with that's in the Microsoft world. And this includes, Microsoft 365 is a very big productivity suite where you can access information such as your users' emails, their calendar, Teams information, such as what teams they're in, their chats with their friends. I don't know, there's so many. And I think, what are the other more popular ones? People that you work with, the organizational structures that you're surrounded with if you are an organizational user. So it's an API that you can go access all this data.
Okay.
And the reason that we're saying that it's an API that rules it all is because it used to be imagine that you're a developer that builds an app that you wanted to access someone's email, and you also wanted to access someone's files in their OneDrive, and you wanted to access, I don't know, maybe a Word document. Before Microsoft Graph, you'd have to specifically authenticate your application towards all of these different service endpoints, like build your, in a less technical way, I guess, relationships between your app and these services in order to retrieve data, right? And with Graph, now your user and your application only need to authenticate once, and you ask the right scopes and permissions, and you're done. So you don't have to, if you're building a productivity-centered app, you don't have to do all of these extra authentication authorization works that nobody likes to do.
Okay.
That, right?
that makes a lot of sense, because you're never going to build an app just needs access to somebody's email or just needs access to somebody's contact list. You're going to need to have access to multiple pieces of information to put together any meaningful application. And so I shouldn't need to go call this API and have to authenticate for this piece, and then authenticate for this piece, and authenticate for this piece.
And this is when the SharePoint developer me comes into play, where when I used to work with SharePoint when Graph was not around, this is more than 4 or 5 years ago. You'd have to depend on the information that you're trying to get. You'd have to decide if you want to go through the CSAM model or the REST model, and then read through, if it's OAuth protocol or CSAM has its own protocol, and whatever your company is trying to go through. So there's a lot of alternatives that you have to decide. Now there's one, and we're trying to make it really easy for developers to go through the authentication process so that you don't have to worry about all of these, plumbing code essentially behind the scenes will do that for you.
Okay, that's fantastic. Because I'm a big believer that the best code in the world is the code that's already written. So if I don't have to write it, then fantastic. That's wonderful.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then, what is Graph Toolkit?
So after Graph become a thing, this is an API layer, right? Like on top of the API layer, you're thinking about how to make the developer experience better. So then we have things like different SDKs that will help you decide, based on the tech stack that you have and based on the language that you choose to build your application, what are the SDKs that you would pick. And then on top of the SDKs, there's another layer, I think recent years become popular. These are the UI components where you can, there's a lot of React UI libraries out there that you can just grab a component, drop it onto your page. You don't have to write any CSS. It kind of just works, right? And then what we're trying to achieve is on top of the SDK, we want you to be able to just write 2 lines of code or grab a web component, HTML code, 2 lines of code. And we have all the functionalities already behind the scenes wired up for you so that you don't have to worry about, this is the API I got to call. These are the permission that I have to write into the scope. And then worry about the authentication process and 5 different ways of authenticating your app. So that's when Graph Toolkit was born, was when we actually worked with a lot of our Microsoft partners, and these companies come to us and said, I think I want to use it, but I really just can't figure out how to do it. Can you help us do it? And after doing it like 5 to 7 times, we're like, oh, let's just make this a thing and package it and have people use it. So we don't have to handhold this process anymore, which is why the login component was first born. So I could show actually a quick demo right now.
Let's do it. Works. Absolutely.
Let me just go to the right folder in tools. I'm in terminal.
Okay.
I'll just clear this.
Can you make your screen size, your font size a bit bigger there? Yeah, there we go.
This is good?
If you got a bit bigger, yeah. You can almost never go too big when it comes to displaying out text demos. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, this is good. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Now you can see there's nothing really in the folder. What I'm going to do is just create a file called index.html. Now that file's there, I'm going to open up my Visual Studio Code with this file in it. Popped up a different window. Drag this over.
I swear it'll randomly pick the window that it wants to put it into.
I thought it was just gonna open up here while my terminal was here. Nah. So here, what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna start a boilerplate HTML where you can just do like an exclamation mark if you're new to this, and then click enter. This gives you everything that you need. Very basic HTML, right? Like there's your head, there's your body, there's nothing in it, and it's wrapped in a HTML tag.
So nothing up your sleeve. So this is just, you've literally just built this HTML file from
exactly.
From blank.
There's nothing, you can see there's nothing in the directory either. So how do I introduce Graph to it, right? Like we're saying that Graph Toolkit is this tool that's so magical that just handles the authentication for me. Everything you want to learn about the Graph Toolkit, you can go to aka.ms/mtt-docs. And then I'm just going to find the most. Here's to the left. Here's get started. I'm going to say overview. And then scroll down. The section says use the toolkit. And then I'm just going to grab this script real quick.
So you're not installing anything, you're just referencing a script.
Right. So because I only have an HTML page open, this is the way that I chose to reference to the package. But if you're building more sophisticated solutions on, I don't know, Node.js or .NET, that you have a backend and wanted to install the package, then we have the npm package for your front end to install the Graph Toolkit.
Okay.
So I'm going to drop this script tag right here. Let me just collapse this. And what I'm going to need to do now is I'll just drop the components in, which is we were talking about MGT login. And then one of the essential attributes that you have to supply for your app to know how to log in is adding the client ID from your app registration in the Azure Active Directory, which we can talk about that here in a minute after I showed you how quick this is. This could enable you. Client ID. And then let me just find my client IDs. So this is an ID that I already registered. If you guys are interested in the process of registering it, I can also share that, or there's documentation for that, because this is just kind of like a administrative task, right? You go to Azure portal, select a couple boxes, and you get this registered. We can show this in a little bit.
Yeah, but that's probably something almost well, I shouldn't say almost everybody has done, but like a lot of people have done. If you've like ever done anything with bot framework or things like that, then you
Right.
have to register the app, and now it's giving you that client ID.
Right.
Okay.
Since we're on the client ID, let me just run this app real quick and show you what this does, and then we're gonna get back to how to talk about what the identity platform is, how does the Azure Active Directory, evolved over time, and why do you need to register that right after.
Okay, perfect.
So what
Then
I'm
we've
gonna
actually got a
use,
great question in chat that's queued up as well about that. So yeah, that's
cool.
perfect. Yeah.
So what I'm gonna do is here on the bottom right, I don't know if you can see, there's go live. This is a very good Visual Studio extension. If you go to Visual Studio Market and search for live server, so this is what I'm using. This will just start a web server for me behind the scenes without having me install. You can use Node or Python to start your server for a web page that way. But I just chose to use, an extension through Visual Studio. Is very fast. So let me click go live.
I love that extension.
Right. And then it says that your port is 5500. So I'm just going to go back here and go to localhost 5500. Oh, you know what? I didn't add the MSOL provider. So it's like 2 lines of code, right? Where's my authentication provider in this? Nowhere.
So we got halfway there. We got one of the 2 lines of code.
For any of the components to show up, you actually have to use the authentication provider. This is me like drunk coding, I feel like. You go to MGT MSOL provider, and then add the client ID there. I'm merging like 2 components together. So how excited that I was in your session. I can't really code for 2 lines of HTML at this point. So now if I save, this is gonna do it. Wait, really?
Uh-oh.
GTM provider client ID provider login. It's because it's this always happens. If I like not do these sessions for like a month and I come back, it's always this provider word. I always miss like somehow there's the O just doesn't register in my head, and this time I actually spelled this one right and this one wrong. All right.
Coding skills are inversely proportional to the number of people watching.
There it is. So after all these hurdles, I have a login component on my page at localhost 5500 that says Megan, because my browser is already signed in as Megan. I'm using Edge right here, and I think Chrome probably has it too. Like you can set up your profiles to have multiple sign-ins, and the browser just picks up my sign-in account right now is the Megan account. So now it automatically signs in through the Microsoft Graph, and you can see like some basic information such as Megan's picture, her name, and her email address.
Okay.
Something else that you could also, so now that we like really, you had 2 lines to set up authentication, right? You reference to the MGT package, and then I use the authentication provider right here, which is just an HTML tag. There's no JavaScript involved whatsoever here. And all you needed to do is supply a client ID, which you registered with the Azure Active Directory, and then drop from there. You can start dropping, what if I want to do MGT agenda? This is going to show me all the calendar events for the logged in user. And because Megan is signing here, I just saved it over here. So as soon as I refresh the page, you can see that there's all of Megan's coming up.
Hold on, wait. No. Go back to this real
Yes.
quick. Go back to your code.
Oh, you want to see the code? Here.
Like you literally just added in that bit of HTML just to say, "Hey, I want the agenda," and that's it. Now you've got the agenda being displayed.
Yep.
Okay. That's
And you can say things like, I think it's days equal, 5. This will show me the next 5 days. I'd have to, sorry, I haven't done this for a while. I have to double check the.
I don't think you saved.
No, I haven't. So
Okay.
what I'm trying to say is whenever you wanted to say, like, because these are web components, you can introduce attributes and properties in order to change the look and feels of the components. So what I wanted to know is if there's any attributes for the agenda component that I can, essentially add something to it, right? So if I go back here in the documentation in the component section and I pick agenda, there it's going to say like you can set a start date. If I set the date, then it's going to start from this date. You can say I only want to show the next 5 days, and you can also say like, oh, I wanted to see day by day. So I'm going to put days and group by day here real quick, and just to show you. So days equal 5 will give you the next 5 days, and then I'm also going to say group by day. And then here I save it. Come back to my browser. Go back to this document, which is still my localhost 5500. Now you can see Wednesday, Thursday, these are group by day, for the next 5 days that you have events on.
That's cool. And so now, like with that, I'm not faking this. Like anybody who knows me, like I'm not here just to go, oh wow, Microsoft makes great products. Although we certainly do pretty well for ourselves. But like that's not my primary goal. My primary goal here is just to chat about cool technology. So like if you're creating a line of business web app where this is the type of information that I need, like I can now get that in literally 3 lines of code.
Yep.
And are there components for like basically every major component that or every major piece of information that's inside of the Graph API? So like I can access email, or I can access like contacts or those types of things as well.
Depends on your definition of essential.
Okay.
So our backlog and future requests are heavily driven by, like I said, our partners and developer ecosystem, right? Like, so we listen to people who come to our GitHub repo, or people that we host meeting with that have lots of customers on their end as well, and they're saying like these are the components that we want to see. And then we kind of collect those and compare with other requests and say these are the most common ones that people's been asking us. So let's build these common ones. So the common login is a big one, right? And then we have here. I know what to show you so that you know everything. So this is for this question specific. We really didn't rehearsal this. I feel like all these questions just came naturally.
They did.
So after the toolkit was born for, I don't know, 6 months or so, this is when I joined the team. Essentially, my first task on the toolkit was how do we have a place for developers to explore all the components that we have, right? Like you said, do you have all the components that we want, and what do they look like? So now we've introduced the Microsoft Graph Toolkit Playground. This is a place, this is built on top of Storybook, which is a well-supported third-party community tool that was originally built for people to debug or showcase or isolate development for component development, such as if you're building React components. So we kind of took this on a different trajectory and said, what if we just show off all of these components here and have people come in and look at it? So other than the agenda that I just showed everybody, and login was another one that we just showed, we have MGT people will show you the people that you regularly work with, and I can change these things to be like 13. So we also, developers have been telling us, how about that you just add a code editor right on the side so that I can just copy and paste once I know it works. And the playground itself is using a sandbox solution, so you don't actually have to sign in and create your own client ID, which is also a common pain point from graph developers, right? So this is the feedbacks that we've taken in and said, let's just build this and have people, play with this right away. We also have People Picker, which this is like I think a popular SharePoint one as well, that you can, that we have a picker essentially showing you like the insights of the people who you normally regularly work with. You can also supply attributes such as a group ID if you know that you wanted to pick a person from a certain group. I don't have a group ID handy right now, so I'm not going to show that off, but if people are interested, we can see that later. And there's also, different stories under each component, such as what if I wanted to pick people in groups, and then, or pick groups. No, there's like a pick people from groups, I thought.
Do you want to zoom in just a scratch there?
Oh, is it small? Sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Perfect.
There, group ID, found it. So if I wanted to pick everybody from a certain group within your AAD registration, then I just apply a group ID, and then everybody that the drop down only shows these people from a certain group ID. So these are all like, features that we take on after that we built the simplest component, and people say, what if I wanted to add this to it? And we're like, we'll give you an attribute for that. How about that? There's also MGT person, where you just simply show somebody, and then there is the person card, where if you hover over a person, such as this, I hover over Megan, it shows me more details about Megan. And let me just make this smaller. And if I click the drop down, then you can see all of the details about Megan. How do I contact them? Who do they report to? What are the skill sets that they have? So these are like mimicking the first party experience of how the person card looks like in Outlook. And then all you need to do is add MGT person card hover. I'll show you, prove it to you.
Yes, that's exactly what I was about to ask. Like that will now work in the browser.
So if I say MGT person query is me, this is gonna get me. But if you wanna, if you're looping through some sort of database that you have all these persons ID, then you can supply those people's IDs here. And then I wanna say that I wanna show the person card hover. I'm also gonna comment out agenda so it doesn't take up a whole bunch of room on the page. I have to scroll down. So I saved it, go back to my browser, I'm gonna go to this, and here's Megan person. I hover over it, here's the card and all the information about Megan.
That is really cool. That is really cool. All right. So there's a whole bunch of questions in chat here. So the first one, and I'm gonna kind of go in backwards order, although I'll bounce around a little bit. But the first one is there TRP 8472 asks, is there a way to potentially block a dev from running specific queries in case it's a misuse, or to enforce queries or what to in I'm going to do that sentence all over again, and this time I'm going to do it in English. Ready? Here we go. Is there a way to potentially block a dev from running specific queries in case it's misuse, or to enforce logging on what queries have been run? And they're thinking about like any regulations that might be applied by different countries.
Okay, it's a very good question. So this comes back to how the tenants work and how data privacy and security and how all of this is implemented around the graph, which is what we're saying. if you're getting your data through Microsoft Graph, then your data is protected and the authentication layer is unified, and you get all the benefit that comes from it because the data is already, GDPR compliant. Microsoft already gone through all of that for you, right? Essentially behind the scenes. As long as you don't store the data once you retrieve it, then you should be fine. But I think you're also asking, can I limit the amount of data the developer is retrieving from the Graph API? Yes. What I didn't show was because my client ID was already set up to have certain permissions. There potentially would be a pop-up when you click on the sign in button. And I don't know if you have an Outlook account, when an app is trying to access your personal information, it'll show like, here, I have a screenshot actually. Everything's handy. I just gotta find it.
I'll give you a second there.
Got it. This is what you would see. Like your app would show like Megan from this app, or your account is Megan. My ASP.NET app is trying to get these permissions from you. And you have to review these permissions from the user's perspective, consent on behalf of the organization if you're an admin, in order to get the correct access token for your app to obtain those informations on behalf of this user through the graph.
Okay.
And the other permission type is if you are deploying an application on the organizational level and you are the admin and you know these are the CIF APIs, then you can set it in your Azure Active Directory in order for different apps to access these out of the box. So we keep saying that we're going to talk about identity. I'm just going to give like a 2-sentence kind of overview for identity so people don't get too confused about it. So to call the Microsoft Graph, your app has to acquire an access token. And these are like, what's it called, JOT tokens that is encoded with, the information of what app this is, who the user is, that sort of information. So this access token is coming from the Microsoft Identity Platform, which is a service. So essentially the authorization piece comes, like you have an app and here is the Microsoft Graph and the authorization piece is in the middle. Your app has to talk to the identity platform first to get these correct tokens in order for it to authenticate against the graph. So the access token contains information, like I said, about your app and the permissions that it has for these resources and the APIs available through the graph. And then to get this access token, your app must register with the identity platform. Later on is evolved into this Azure Active Directory, which is AAD, Azure AD, Identity Service and Developer Platform, which is where the client ID is coming from. So if you have a Azure account, all you got to do is go to portal.azure.com.
Don't forget to zoom in.
Yes. Figure it again. And then what you're going to do is come here, go to Azure Active Directory.
Contoso. There we go. Now it's an official presentation. We've got Contoso.
On the left side, there's the app registrations. Here's going to show you all the app that's available for you. Apparently, last time that I did a demo was at OSU. And then
you set that up perfect on purpose just to poke at me.
So what you do is click New Registration. This is essentially how you get that client ID, right? And then you say, this is going to be the Web Wednesday demo. And then the tenant types are somewhat important because you need to figure out if this application is only going to be installed in your tenant, which is a single tenant, or you want it to be multi-tenant, which means the app can be used by multiple organizations or schools. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and tenant, for anybody who hasn't heard the word, is basically like it's the more technical Azure specific for like a company. So typically a company would have like one main tenant.
Right.
Okay.
And the multi-tenants use case are more like, I'm a software provider, right? Like I wanted to build software and sell them to multiple companies in order for them to use for their users. Then this is going to be a multi-tenant application. You can also enable personal accounts or personal accounts only. So normally I'll just pick the the broadest one, that I want to support them all. I want to make money. If I build an app, it's better be used by a lot of people. So then in the redirect URI, here's where your app is deployed. So in my case, it was localhost 5000. And then you just click register, and this is all you need to do to create an app ID. And after this step, there are certain configurations based on your needs and how complicated your applications are. And when we have documentations out in graph.microsoft.com that you can take a look at. For an application to use Microsoft Graph Toolkit, what you need to do is go to authentication and then check. Wait, is it authentication? Maybe not. I thought it was authentication. Hold on. Oh, it's because I didn't add a URL, wasn't it? So let me go back here, and then I'm going to add a redirect URI, add a platform. I'm going to do web. And this is going to be HTTP localhost 5000 or 5500. And then right here, when you're creating your platform, you need to check both access token and ID token, so your app knows that through the Microsoft Identity Platform, I wanted to go through the implicit grant and get these tokens for the app.
So basically, you created an app, you gave it a name, you specified a URL, you hit 2 checkboxes, and then you hit a blue button, and that's it.
Yes.
Okay.
So we've actually heard a lot about like this process wasn't simple enough, but there's just no way for us to have a script, but also, you know, include all these informations for you. But because of there's so many different ways to configure your client ID. And like I said, if your application is more sophisticated, there's other things that you could do right here, like adding certifications, pre-set up API permissions. But because we're going through the dedicated permission route, which is implicit grant, we don't really need to do all that.
So that actually, I think, leads perfectly to this question, which is from HDY NYC 83. I'm not exactly sure how that's supposed to be pronounced. But what's the difference between Graph API and Azure AD Graph?
Oh, that's a great question. I actually can't tell you 100% because I never really looked into it 100%. I know that Azure was trying to make it simple so that they have like this little toggle that you can just click, and then when you're downloading your like app sample or something, the Graph SDK piece already embedded in it. I think that's what they're asking. Depends on if you want to essentially deploy your app onto Azure, I guess. That might be a quicker step. But that does not stop you from using the Graph Toolkit.
Okay.
Because, like I said, there's different layers on top of each other, right? Like, I think the Azure Graph piece will just make it easier when you're deploying your application to Azure. But when you're building your application from scratch, maybe it's easier for you to deploy to multiple, whatever platform that you like, right? The other thing is that I always talk about Graph Toolkit is the authentication providers is not just limited to the MSAL provider, which was the one that I showed right here. This is stand for the Microsoft Authentication Library, which is essentially, libraries that's built to easily access the identity platform. We also have providers that supports the Microsoft Teams platform, the SharePoint platform. We have a proxy provider to support if you have your own backend and you wanted to handle the authentication yourself, or you already have an application that does some of the graph stuff and you don't want to rip out these pieces, or you have security concerns is a big one too, right? Like you want to do server to server communications versus client to server. So we have those providers built and samples out there for developers that are interested in doing those kind of scenarios. And if you have more suggestions to like other auth providers, I'd love to hear them. The recent one that we built is because we're expanding our horizon from web developer centric, and we've seen a lot of numbers grow, and we now have a lot of partners, and we're thinking, how do we expand our what's it called, the developer community, right? So the next one that we're trying to kind of looking at is, we have a lot of people building native apps, and Windows apps being one of them, and this is our own Microsoft developers community. How do we enable them to build Windows UWP apps or PWAs, your web apps converting into a like native experience and having the graph embedded into it. So the next provider that's coming out is a Electron provider, which if you're building Electron, you wanted to deploy your app across platforms, we will have the authentication provider for you to connect to the graph very easily. Like I said, I'm happy to hear more about what other people's building, so just let me know, and we're making it easier for everybody.
No, all of that's fantastic. Zora Zero does ask the question if you're using Macintosh, and the answer is yes, because she's just working with HTML here. So like this is not this isn't your parents' Microsoft. Like it's not just Windows around here.
It's actually funny. I'm actually sitting in the Windows org technically. So this is very interesting. Every time I go to a meeting, sometimes people are like, "Are you really using a Mac?" And I was like, "Yeah, you need people to test your applications cross-platform, cross-browser. I have Safari out of the box. I can tell you what's the benefit of using different platforms. Why wouldn't I?" So,
Absolutely.
exactly.
Yep. No, I'm a big believer in using what works. The biggest reason that I don't use a Mac is just because it doesn't quite meet my needs. But I'm so thrilled that we've now got WSL on Windows. That as far as I'm concerned now, Windows is the best developer box, specifically because of WSL. So. Yeah, it's fantastic.
See, which is why it's gone full circle. I was like, oh, there's so many people on Windows. How do we get them to build graph stuff for me?
Yes. There was a question here who asked, Arctic Dev asked the question about stylization. Can that be manipulated with CSS?
Yes, let's go back to
It's like you were predicting this question was about to come. Like it.
I've been doing this for a year. I've seen so many questions around all different things on graph, kind of what's it called? Prepared, but
I'm just going to make a suggestion. You should really find a job on the Graph Toolkit team, and I just give it some thought.
No, I'm already on the Graph Toolkit team. Is that what you're saying?
That's the joke. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Most of these jokes are just for my own entertainment. It's good.
Your dad joke. Forgot about that. Haven't seen you for a while. So let's talk about why Graph Toolkit becomes so popular per se. First of all, like I said, it's a functional component, right? Like you don't really have to write a lot of code. Works with any web framework. You can easily add this to your React project, your Angular project, your Vue project. We actually write our own React MGT wrapper to make registering functional components in your React app super easy if you chose React as a platform or framework, excuse me. It works in all the browsers. It is out of the box, have a look and feel for M365, right? These are like your Outlook type of Microsoft look. The next thing that I was about to say is it's very flexible in terms of updating both the functionality and the look and feel. So here, I think I might have a demo for this too. Sorry, let me demo. Yeah, let me do this. So I'm going to go back to person card. Right here. And was it person card? All right, let me see. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is just in the person card, or let me just do person. It might be easier. So I'm just going to give it an ID and say this is me. And then in the JS JavaScript window, I'm going to paste all of this stuff, which defines a component that gets that element me. And then I wanted to set the person details, which somehow it hasn't gotten it. Person query. Probably got to remove this. So there you go. Now I supplied my own data for one. So I'm just using the MGT person component, and I didn't specify any of the queries for this person. And by obtaining this component from the DOM and then building this component out myself, I just need to supply the correct JSON properties, right, to this component. And then in the CSS tab, what I can do is I'm going to go back to the documentation again, bear with me, and then go to person. Here is where you will find all the customizable CSS properties right down here. Say I wanted to change line properties or colors. Let's just change colors. That might be easier. So I'm going to just do initial colors. How about that? And then I'm going to go back to the playground and here just say MGT person. I'm going to select the person element from the DOM tree, and then I'm going to show initial colors. Oh, this is for the, like, if there's no picture.
Oh, right.
So what's this? It's going to calculate my initials. And then, and I can say, like, I don't know, pink. No, green. So then there you go. My initial colors are green now.
Okay.
And you can also change other properties such as, you know, the line, the first line, the second line, the third line, font color, or just color, right? Like if I do line 2, because right now I only have 2 lines. I'm going to copy the line 2 color and then say I want this to be, anyways, it changed.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So there's basically there's the custom CSS attributes then for each of the individual components. So I don't need to figure out, like, you know, how to specifically ID one particular spot by like figuring out what the HTML DOM is actually emitting. That I can just simply say, hey, I want this second line to now be this, and away I go there.
Right. This kind of goes back to the Graph Toolkit component library is built on top of web standard. We picked web components to build our components on top of.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with web components, it's actually like the elements are rendered in Shadow DOM, which is a little hard for developers to pick, like add CSS selectors in order to open your Shadow DOM and pick the correct class or ID or whatever that to apply new CSS on them. So by exposing these custom CSS properties, we're kind of saving you time to do your own, you know, custom, like attaching your CSS to the Shadow DOM step is being replaced by it. And we're actually building, this is the next step as well. I was working on, before the New Year's, I was working on a theming feature. So now all of our components all have dark theme. You can see
Yay! Dark
so
theme,
if you're
all
building,
the things.
if you're building for dark theme, you can see like there's a dark theme story under each component. Like these are the dark theme for agenda. You can say dark theme for if I want to pick a Teams channel. This is something that we haven't showed off. So this is a Teams channel picker in dark theme that I can pick. You know, I wanted this channel in order to finish my workflow. Or I can show something like my to-do tasks. Was another component that was fairly popular with us. Oh, actually, I don't have any to-dos. I'll just do tasks then. So tasks is a merge of to-do and planner, and then MGT to-do is just to-do tasks from your personal or Microsoft to-do. So yeah, we build all the dark themes for all of our components, and most of the dark themes are exposed through custom CSS properties, so it's very easy for you to change any of these, you know, borders, border styles, or text colors, or if you want to calculate the profile picture somehow, you know, you can stop retrieving the profile picture and attach something else to it. Very flexible.
That's so cool. Yeah. I'm honestly, I'm floored at how well this works and how easy
Yay.
that all comes together. There is another question here from Timebender 360, which is, can Microsoft Graph or the Graph Toolkit be used in a Blazor app to say update and NES specifically to update a SharePoint list? So I actually want to break that down into like two separate parts. So number one, can it be used in a Blazor app? And then number two, can it update a SharePoint list?
Yes, both are yes.
Perfect.
So we actually currently has a, so I just went to aka.ms/mgt. This is our GitHub repo. There is a pull request on adding Blazor example. I think we already have a Blazor sample. So if you go to, because this says Teams Blazor server sample. So if you go to code, sorry, here.
There we go.
Samples folder. Here are all the samples that we have. Oh, I guess that one hasn't been merged. So yes, there is a, you could use it within your Blazor apps. And I know that there's two types of Blazor apps, right? Like one is server, the other one, sorry, I'm not an expert, but I'm working with one of our MVPs. Yeah, so in this pull request, I think his name is, yeah, Thomas. He is one of our MVPs who's helping us because he has the expertise in building Blazor apps. So he's working on getting these samples out of the door so we can have these for people who's using Blazor. The second part of the question is updating a SharePoint list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you could actually, you could use Microsoft Graph to do it. I don't think we have a component for you to do that specifically, like a UI component, because
Okay.
it sounds like more functional, right? Like you just wanted to call an API and update SharePoint list. If you go to everything and anything that you want to learn about Graph, you should go to graph.microsoft.com. And then we have the Graph Explorer that we actually didn't have time to talk about. Maybe next time. It's very cool. Get started samples are like all tech stack based. And then if you go to docs and API reference and search for, or if you know what it is, I think it's like sites and lists. There it is. And then go to lists. So update a list item would be somewhere here, right? Right here, patch.
Okay.
So this is for if you're talking about getting the functionality ready, but if you want to use our authentication provider to build a SharePoint web part, you know, and embed it within your SPFX environment, and from there using, you know, a channel picker or something to pick a list, or using other MGT components, you could use our SharePoint provider, which we have a sample for that too.
That's cool. There is a question from TRP if there's a section on Microsoft Learn yet about Graph Toolkit.
Man, you guys are asking all the things that I know. The Learn module is actually just approved today,
Okay.
I think. The team who's helping us building this is the Azure or Cloud Advocates team. So there's
it's basically the team that I'm on. So
so you know, I don't know if you know do you know Acha?
the name sounds familiar.
Or Baldax, Beshen, those are they're on the graph front. So I think Acha is on point building the Learn modules. It's going to be a learning path. So starting with, you know, what's MGT, why would you use it, and how do you get started? Just as what I showed you earlier, like 3 lines from your client, and then she goes really deep into each provider, like how do you use the proxy provider, how do you use the SharePoint provider, how to use the Teams provider to build on different platforms, and then she also goes into details of, you know, how to customize your components both on HTML attributes or JavaScript properties, or if you want to use custom CSS properties, like how those would plan out. And we are also planning on a video series. This is driven by the MVP community, just because our team's really small, really don't have time to do this anymore.
You're too busy creating great products.
Yeah, thank you. It's not just me; it's teamwork. There's 4 or 5 of us working really hard. Like all of this comes from like a year and a half, right? So we do have MVPs working closely with us, helping us creating content, great content out there. And the video series is actually based off of a blog series that we had last year. So if you want to learn in depth of how, look at each sample, you can go to AKA-MS MGT Lab. Its full name is funny. It's called A Lap Around the Microsoft Graph Toolkit blog series.
That was
So
aka.ms/mgt
MGT Lab LAP.
LAP.
Yeah,
Okay.
like a lap around the Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
Clever.
So here, like each article is about 5-minute read, and then at the end we're focusing on giving you an exercise. So all of these are open source that you can go look at the exercise and look at how our MVPs built these samples and follow along. And there are some very specific topics, such as exploring all the components. How do you get started? How to customize? How do you use custom templates? These are very advanced topics, and we have an MGT get component, which you can essentially build any get calls through the graph, and then show it somehow on the page. And then how do all the providers work are right here, and then platform specific or framework specifically, if you want to use React or Angular, how to build these. So if you like reading, these are out there. If you prefer watching videos, which you probably do since you're here, those are coming.
Okay. Are those going to be on Channel 9? Are they going to be on YouTube?
There's a Microsoft 365 channel on YouTube, so most likely
okay.
we're going to publish all the videos there.
Okay. All right. And is that just youtube.com/Microsoft 365?
I actually don't know the specific URL. Sorry, I'm not prepared on that front. Finally.
No, that's fine. We got 56 minutes through this before I finally found one question you couldn't answer.
Microsoft 365. Here. So I guess Office videos is the extension. But yeah, just search for Microsoft 365. It's a channel.
Okay. Perfect.
And we're probably going to create like a full playlist for the Graph Toolkit here.
Okay. That's awesome. I'm sure that that Channel 9 would be interested in all of that as well. So
cool.
That's fantastic. What's I want to be clear to anybody who's watching. Like, we didn't set any of this up. It flowed this perfectly, because normally the way that I would end this is by saying, all right, well, where can people find out more information? And you've just given us the list of everywhere that people can go find all of this information. So yeah, so that's fantastic. Cool. So that is like in just a little bit of like pseudo HTML and all of that, how you can start creating some amazing, like, real high-end components that connect out to Graph, which can then in turn give you basically access to anything that a user might be using inside of Microsoft 365.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's awesome. Where can people find you for information on Graph Toolkit?
Our repo is at aka.ms/mgt, which is Microsoft Graph Toolkit.
Yep.
So this is our GitHub repo where you can see our roadmap, what's coming, past releases. You can help us submit any bugs or issues that you find. If you, like I said, our team is very small. If you find issues through coding, so please just help us fix it. So PRs are very welcomed. I actually started a program last year, which is still going. I think we're going to extend it towards the mid-year this year, like June. So our team picks 3 to 5 developers every month that contributed to our repo, and we send you like a care package, like backpacks, T-shirts, and a giraffe or something. So just a little incentives for developers to build on top of our platform.
You need your giraffe.
I know. Gotta do it now.
There you go.
I also like screenshots to prove it to my team that I actually did this. Hold on. And then Something else you could do is if you wanted to read our, okay, smile, Christopher. If you want to read our documentation, go to aka.ms/mgt-docs. So that's where the MGT docs are. Like I said, if you want to learn beyond the Graph Toolkit, if you just want to see more information on the graph, go to graph.microsoft.com. There is everything about graph there. If you would like to play with some of the queries, definitely check out Graph Explorer. My first team at Microsoft actually used to work on those. And there is an SDK for everything if you would like to, build your own connect to the graph type of application. You're just like, no, I don't like any of this toolkit stuff that they talked about today. I'm going to prove my programmability. I'll use the SDK myself. You could definitely do that.
I love it. Beth, thank you so much for coming on, talking about the Graph Toolkit, talking about identity and all of that good stuff. Yeah, once we're able to, we should definitely like actually get together again and yell at one another about college football.
I know, right?
But until then, thanks again for coming on, chatting about Graph. I know I learned a lot. Hopefully everybody else did. And yeah, this is Web Wednesday. Next week, I think I'm talking about React with Aaron Powell. I don't remember now. Yeah, tune in next week. We'll all be surprised together. But in the meantime, thank you and have a great night, everybody. Bye.
Sounds awesome. Bye.